Welcome, guys. Today we're looking at the Dungeon Alphabet by Goodman Games. Now, I know it's made by Goodman Games, so you probably think it's for DCC, but it's actually system neutral. You can use this with pretty much any sort of fancy gaming, whether it's, 5e, Pathfinder, Old School Essentials, DCC, any of those. This will work just fine. And basically, this book's gimmick is that it has a different entry for each letter for things that you could find in a dungeon. Now, there's actually 44 tables in the 5th printing. I currently have the 4th printing. The only difference is that there's one less table in mine, so if you end up buying this now on the Goodman Game Store, wherever, you'll get the 5th edition printing. So before we get into the actual book itself, I'm not sure how different the 5th edition printing is. I'm sure someone in the comments who does have it can attest to what it's like, but the 4th edition one is pretty nice. It's nothing really to write home about. You want to have is the usual sort of just, basic hardcover, and it's black and white print on the inside, except for, that classic sort of light blue look that you'll see in a lot of the old D&D adventures and that sort of thing. As for the layout, it's what you expect from something like Goodman Games, which is, you have all the crazy art. Some of it has just a table right there like this one. I'll try and actually show it properly, where there's art going all around the border, but then you actually have the table inside. So it's what you expect. Really nice layout. Really, really easy to read through. None of the art gets in the way of anything. It's very, very simple. So it's all good on that front. I'm assuming the 5th edition one is similar. I looked at the PDF for it. I couldn't really see many differences. It seems like they mostly just add that extra table, and they might fix a few other things that the older editions, need fixing. So let's get into the actual Dungeon Alphabet itself. There's not a lot for me here to analyze, but I do think it's fun just to use some examples, just to show you what you can expect from this, because it covers a wide variety of things. It's not just like, oh, here's a monster, here's a cave. I would say it covers almost every aspect you need of a dungeon, from giving out quests to sort of plot hooks to actual enemies or interesting treasure or weird environments. It has a lot of stuff. We're gonna start with A is for altars as the first one here, just because it's early in the book, and this will be a pretty good example of how you can use this. So if you already had an idea that you had a certain thing you wanted, like in a special part of the dungeon, like the final treasure or like a weird cursed item, you're just looking for a little bit of extra flavor to add to it. So the altars table has actually 3 different columns on it, and it has an appearance, the accoutrement, and special properties. Now, like I said, if you already had your idea of what the properties were for it, you could just ignore that last one. But the appearance of the altar, there's a load here. There's like crystalline or glass, white alabaster, rusted iron, strong timber bound with metal, pulsating living tissues. Like, it covers a bunch. There's 20 different ones there could be here. The accoutrement, there's ones like classic large gong. I mean, it's DCC, you gotta have a gong somewhere in your books. There's, a statue of a god, goddess, or saint. Drapery hangs behind it. So there's all these little different details that you could use. So you have the stuff here that just gives you some ideas that you can just add to your dungeon, because you're just looking for a little bit of extra than just going off the fly. All of us at one point or another kind of fail a little bit in giving out details. Sometimes you go back, you're like, oh man, I really wish I described that better, just really captured how dangerous this was before they touched it, or, just made it a little bit more interesting for my players than falling back on, an old faithful one I always use or that sort of thing. To show the diversity in the different tables and everything this covers, the next one is A is also for adventurers. It's not just 26 tables for each letter. They do double up on some of the different letters for extra ones. So the gimmick does work, but I do think it's bending a little bit just to get more tables in there, but it's extra content, so I'm not going to complain. But to get to the actual adventuring band themselves, this is a really good example here of both what you could use for rivals or interesting other NPCs to find in your dungeon, or even be the beginning of its own little sub-story or plot hook or extra kind of mystery, all dead. Alas for them, the other party has yet to realize they've shoveled off the mortal coil. Powerful magics, a lingering curse, or simply the power of disbelief keeps them going. The party refuses to acknowledge they are dead no matter what evidence is presented, and become violent if the PCs continue in their efforts to convince them. Making things worse, their condition is contagious. Every monster the dead party slays in battles also lingers on, but in a more horrific and dangerous undead state. If the PCs reconcile the party with their fate, they are allowed to rest and the undead monsters are destroyed. I think that's a really great one that you can throw into pretty much any dungeon, because there's so much there. It doesn't constrain you with too many details that you're held onto one storyline if you ever use this more than once. It really keeps it broad, so you can use it in many different ways. It also opens up different questions like, how did they end up this way? Are we going to end up this way? What do they remember? Also dealing with them as they're actually a threat, even if they're not, hostile towards the party. They're a threat because they're killing random things, and those things are coming back maybe even worse than they started off with. And also, I think a classic sort of fancy story is reconciling with ghosts and how to get them, to cross over to their side, or finally put to rest, or destroy them in some way. So it could go so many different ways, from, destroying with turn unholy, maybe like a really powerful one. Maybe figuring out it's something they did themselves, or like they took some treasure from this dungeon and unless it's returned, they will stay like this. It could be the dungeon itself that's corrupted, where if you die here, this is what happens to you, and the party has to figure out how they can, reverse that in some way, if it's possible at all. Maybe it turns out that there is no way to reverse this, and the story becomes less about this undead party because it's too late for them, and more, there's really good stuff down here, or we really need to be here for whatever job we're on. Is this gonna actually be worth it? Because if we die, we're gonna make things so much worse, and there is no coming back from this. So there's so many different things you can do with that. And that's just one paragraph of 11 other ones. So this is the sort of stuff you can have in here. From describing an altar to just having a whole adventuring band that creates an entire story off of just one small thing. But I didn't want to just leave you guys with just, 2 examples, because I do think, even though those do show how broad you can go with this, I think just giving you some extra examples to see what's in here is probably just what a lot of people want to see. So next one we're going to look at is Q is for questions, and number 2 here is the party chances upon an oversized stone disc, marked with increments and slowly turning. After thorough examination, it becomes clear that this is a timer counting down to some event. What happens when time runs out? And again, it's very broad, so you can really use this in so many different ways. One thing I think is pretty fun, because I could see wanting to add this and then going like, oh, man, I don't even know what to do with this. This is really cool. And a really, really good trick as a GM is throw this up to the players, and the players will sometimes just throw out ideas to each other, or they might go, hey, maybe that dead wizard we saw will come back to life when this hits 0, or, maybe when this happens, this thing's gonna explode, or whatever it might be, or these doors will open. And from that, you can sort of go like, oh, that's a really good idea. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. When this happens, that idea that player came up with is going to happen. Now, you don't tell them that. In the moment, I think it's great to do that, just because players will often have really great ideas that you don't think of. And also, players love being right. So I could see you using this just to make them feel really good about themselves for actually guessing what they think it was. And maybe you could build a whole dungeon just off of this one idea, where maybe the first thing they see when they open the doors is this timer just starts. And it's because of them. And they're like, what does this mean? Is something going to happen? What do we do? And you could just lead a whole thing into that. Maybe they're worried about the timer, so they start moving through faster. They start doing things more risky. It could just be a fun little trick somebody put in there just to mess with anybody who comes in. It could be the actual, doom of anybody who's in the area. You can do so much with just this one little sentence in question. And I'll just cover one last one, and I thought this was just a really funny one to use. And it's S is for stairs, and the one I picked out here is number 11, just because I thought it was a little bit humorous. And that's, the stairs are statically charged. The stairs are covered in an unusual woolly material that generates static electricity. By the time the party reaches the bottom, each has become charged with static electricity of unusual strength. Party members touching metal or flesh discharge the electrical force, doing damage to themselves and others. A cunning party might be able to use this energy to their benefit, but so might other residents of the dungeon. And that's just a really fun one, because like it says there, I could already see a bunch of my groups using that as a way to just really just hit people with electricity, not caring about the damage they do to themselves. And also anybody who's in the dungeon might know about it, maybe an adventuring man that already went through that part, or ones who are in the area, or maybe the ones who set it up. And who knows, you can make that part of a whole thing where maybe they're throwing metal at the players, or they're doing some extra stuff where they're actually using the energy from the players to power some machine. And I just thought it was a funny one to use. But yeah, that's the Dungeon Alphabet, guys. There's a lot of good stuff in here. I do really recommend it if you're going to be doing your own dungeons and you just want a little bit of inspiration. I will say, though, that this is one of those books where I do think you could actually just get the PDF version. If you don't want to pay for, the shipping that is pretty crazy these days, especially from the Goodman Game Store, or you don't really want any extra books or anything like that on your shelf, I don't think you necessarily need this one in print. But this is a great book just to have while you're doing prep. So having a PDF form is great for that, because you can just, scroll through and quickly grab whatever you need. It's not necessarily a book that you're really going to have to peruse the table, But hey, it is also a really fun book to sit down with and just sort of look through and all the different things. I'll say, while doing this review, I was looking through different ones, and I found it really hard to decide which ones I wanted to pick, because I was getting so many different ideas and inspiration of what I could use with so many different tables and entries. So it's a really fantastic book. I highly recommend it. I should also do the Adventurer's Almanac, which I think is right here behind me at some point as well, which is a book in a similar vein. So I'll have to cover that one at some point as well. I just want to do a short video just to sort of test out the new setup. I still have lights coming. We got hit with a storm here on the island, so everything got pushed back a bunch. I was really, really hoping to have a Crypt the Devil Lich video out like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but my book didn't arrive until I think the 25th of January. But I'm hoping to have a pretty big video out this week if I can get around to it and edit fast enough. And I'm looking forward to February. We should have a lot of good videos coming out then, if I, get around to actually doing it and if things arrive in time. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a good one, and stay safe out there.